Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors and Government Affairs Committee. It's my pleasure to welcome you to Government Affairs, to our Government Future Business Position Candidates Forum. The Chamber of Commerce is a non-political, member-based organization representing the interests of businesses of the Bedford County region. Our advocacy efforts are focused on providing information concerning issues of importance to the business community while providing opportunities for voters to make decisions. This forum is the first of a three-part series leading up to the May primary. We hope you will join us for our April 26th breakfast forum featuring candidates for the county offices like Sheriff and Secretary on May 6th for the candidates for the Bedford County Commissioner. I'd like to thank our partners for today's forum, the Bedford County Bar Association, Bedford County Farm Bureau, and a special thanks to the Chamber's Government Affairs Committee and the staff for their work on making this event possible. At this time, it's my pleasure to turn the program over to our moderator for the forum, the Chair of the Chamber Government Affairs Committee, Marty Moore.
Thank you, Alan. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Morning, Marty.
So as we know, this event features two candidates who are vying for the Bedford County Court of Common Pleas. Just a review of our protocol before we invite the candidates to the stage. A memorandum of understanding was reviewed and agreed upon by both candidates prior to this morning's event. Questions from today's event were constructed by the Government Affairs Committee. The podium at which the table at which the candidates will sit were chosen in order in which they will speak was determined by a coin flip. Well, I'm really murdering this. The forum will last no longer than 75 minutes, beginning with the asking of the first question. The audience should kindly remain quiet throughout the event and not address any of the candidates, applaud or comment on any of the candidates' answers. So at this time, we would like to welcome our candidates to the stage. In alphabetical order, Attorney Dwight Deal and Attorney Randy Hershey. Would you kindly join us? So again, each question will solicit a 90-second response. Our timekeepers this morning will put up a yellow card when there's 10 seconds remaining in the allotted time, and a red card when the time is over. So, right into the questions. And by coin toss, Attorney Hershey is going first. Attorney Hershey, what qualifies you to sit on the bench beyond your law degree?
Obviously, any judicial candidate should have a broad legal background, which I think, frankly, both candidates have. Up and above that, the things and the qualities we look to in electing a judge should be essentially, I would submit two other things. Service to the community. I think I have a broad background in history and service to this community outside of my job of being an attorney. I serve on various boards within the community, such as Vice Chair of the Bedford County Development Association. I serve on the Board of Directors for Personal Solutions Incorporated, the Bedford County Library. I'm also heavily involved in the Bedford County Pink Ribbon Fund, where I serve as board member and allocation chair. All of these things have shown a dedication and commitment to this community. I care about the families of this community, and I think I've shown that through my service to to these various organizations. I also serve on the Birthing Center Committee with the goal of trying to bring a birthing center to Bedford County after UPMC closed our maternity wing. And then up and above that, up and above service to the community, I also think I'm qualified in the sense of my reputation in the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Attorney Deal, what qualifies you to sit on the bench beyond your law?
I believe it's my experience and broad-based experience. I started out working for my career as a U.S. patent attorney in the U.S. Department of Commerce down in Virginia. I started dealing with attorneys there. Moved back home in 1992 and have been a family man, and I believe connected well with the community and the concerns of Bedford County. I helped coach Little League for my son, was greatly involved in all the activities of my daughters, including band front and things like that with Bedford High School. I believe that and my just experience and my knowledge of how Bedford County court system works. I've been an assistant district attorney, a public defender, and worked for domestic relations. And I believe in this particular instance, the judge, either Attorney Hershey or myself, whichever takes the bench, will be the family court judge. So I believe the experience I've had working with domestic relations and representing clients in custody issues, dealing with children and youth, and things of that nature will serve me greatly in setting as the family law judge, hopefully as the next Court of Common Pleas. And also just my love for Bedford County. And I've been born and raised in farming community and believe I have a real good sense of the concerns and issues for the citizens here in the county. Thank you.
Thank you. Changing orders, Attorney Deal, what is your general judicial philosophy?
I would say that would be conservative and a constructionalist or originalist. What I mean by that is when the law was written, I believe my philosophy is to interpret it as it was written and as it was intended at the time it was written. There's one theory out there that the law needs to be living, growing, and changing. That's true. That's why we have legislators, to change the law. If the law that was written in the past has not met the needs of the folks today. So my judicial philosophy is to read, interpret, and apply the law as it was intended when it was written. Thank you.
Thank you. Attorney Hershey, what is your general judicial philosophy?
I would characterize my judicial philosophy as a strict constructionalist. What that means is it is the judge's, at least at the trial court level, it's the judge's place to interpret the law and apply the facts as the judge finds them to be. It is not, a courtroom is not the place to enact social change. That should come from our legislatures. That's why we have 3 separate branches of government. As Attorney Deal said, there are some philosophies out there that believe that the Constitution is a living, breathing, changing document. I believe that completely flies in the face of our system of government. Our framers gave us 3 equal branches of government. They're to serve as checks and balances on each other. If we have the judiciary essentially enacting laws, changing the Constitution, that's not what was intended. That's our representatives' job. And the representatives are elected by the people. And if the representatives enact a law or amend the Constitution in such a fashion that the people don't like it, what's the remedy? The people vote the bums out. That shouldn't be coming from our judges. A judge's job is to interpret and apply the law as it's written. Thank you.
Thank you. Attorney Hershey, describe an experience in your career that has shaped your judicial philosophy.
In the realm of family law cases, in many cases, very, very difficult decisions have to be made. The law needs to be followed, and ultimately what's to be decided is what's in the best interest cases that really, where the law was followed, but boy, the result was difficult. Specifically, there was a case where I represented a mother who, it was a Children and Youth Services case, or started out as a Children and Youth Services case, and I was appointed by the court to represent the mom. She was a drug addict. At one point, she had attempted suicide with her child in the house. So the court removed the child, and rightly so. A few years later, mom had actually, one of the very few cases I've seen, had turned her life around. She had been clean and sober for at least 5 years. She had went to college and obtained her master's degree. She was employed. She had married. She was, in my eyes, as an individual representing her, she was almost a success story. Well, fast forward, then the family who had taken the child wanted to adopt him. And the court denied my client's objection to that. That was heart-wrenching, but it was what the law required.
Thank you. Attorney Deal, describe an experience in your career that has shaped your judicial philosophy.
I don't know if I can pick out a single one. As I'm sure Attorney Hershey would also agree, as you're practicing law, there are things that come up every day. Each case is different. Each one shapes your belief and your belief in the law and how it should be applied. If I'd have to pick out one single incident or whatever, I would say it was quite a few years ago now when I was elected to be district attorney. Having served as district attorney and dealing with young children, both as victims and then as maybe a young child as their father or their mother has been accused of a crime, you see what it does to the families. And that's really, I think, what shaped my career in my desire to work for both sides, get justice for both families. When you see families being torn apart both as victims and on the side of an alleged perpetrator, it's heart-wrenching to deal with to watch what the children and the families suffer through. So I would say, if it was a single incident, it would be election as district attorney, but not a single incident. It's all the cases that involve family and some type of abuse in a family. Thank you.
Thank you. Attorney Deal, what beliefs or values are most important to you?
Faith, family, and justice. And I say that pretty much in the order of what I believe is important. My faith, belief in the good Lord, that He will guide me and help me make unbiased, fair, impartial decisions as a judge. Family, in that they have supported me, got me to where I am, and taught me a lot. Raising 4 children up through teenager years, 3 of them young ladies, it taught me a lot. So I think that's shaped me as an individual, as a father, as a person, and as an attorney. And then justice, again, going back to serving for both as part-time for a public defender's office and in the district attorney's office, seeking justice, having the right thing done so that the victims feel that they have been vindicated, have been made whole, they have got justice, and yet treating the defendants, as hard as it is at times, as human beings. They are people too. We've all made mistakes, myself included. So I would say it would be faith, family, and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Attorney Hershey, what beliefs or values are most important to you?
I think the beliefs and the values that are most important to me is an investment in and a belief in our system that we all enjoy as it relates to our families. I always ask people, what's most important to you in this world? And many times people will say my family. And I think here in Bedford County, we take care of our own. If you've ever noticed, if there's ever a need in the community, boy, this community sure steps up. So I think, for me personally, I think family values is some cases, or a lack of family values is part of what the problems we're seeing in our legal system, an erosion of family values and erosion of faith. Those things are very important. And, you know, when I think about family, sometimes people will ask me, well, if you were serving in this particular role, you know, who do you represent? You know, who are you advocating for? And as a common pleas judge, number one, you're not advocating for anyone. You are, however, making lifelong and life-changing decisions for people. And you're not on anybody's side. You're not on mom's side. You're not on dad's side. But I will say, I am on the side of the angels, because that's my mentor when I first started law school, or excuse me, first started in my law career, said just always be on the side of the angels, the side of the children.
Thank you. Attorney Hershey, do you think the court system is working, or do you believe the civil or criminal justice system is breaking down? Why or why not?
That is a good question. I think our system, our legal system, whether it be criminal or civil, I think it works. I have faith in it. Occasionally things will happen that may rock the trust that citizens have in the judicial system, but I believe in the system. For example, more often than not, when I was a prosecutor and handling jury trials, believe it or not, juries got it right. And I always felt value in, after a jury trial, to go seek out the jurers, and if they were willing to talk and just explain how they came to their decision, that was very helpful. And more often than not, I was always floored by the fact that they got it right. Anytime you have an adversarial system like the legal system, you're going to have somebody who feels that they were cheated, or someone who feels that they were not treated correctly. That's the nature of the beast, frankly. But I do have faith in our legal system. I think it's been founded upon hundreds of years of jurisprudence and precedent, and I think it works.
Thank you. Attorney Deal, do you think the court system is working, or do you believe the civil or criminal justice system is breaking down? Why or why not?
I believe overall the system is working. There are problems with the judicial system like there are with any other system. But I believe as a whole, our criminal and civil justice system is working. I believe it's the best in the world. And I believe Bedford County is a notch above a lot of what's going on federally. I think there are some breakdowns there, the way things are being treated and the Constitution is being interpreted. However, here in Bedford County, I think it's working real well. What you folks and the general public don't normally see is what goes on behind the scenes, the negotiations, all of the facts in a case. You might read what's printed in the newspaper, what's there may be completely accurate, but it may be 10% of the whole story. So I think if folks knew the entire sets of facts, I think everyone would be primarily in agreement that our system, especially in Bedford County, is working. When you see handling juvenile cases, when you see these children that get placed, sent away, removed from their families, come back, stand in front of now Judge Ling, and him commend them for their success at these placements. They come out and are successful citizens and go on and lead a very productive life. So I would say it is working and working well in Bedford County. Thank you.
Thank you. Attorney Deal, what challenges do you foresee for yourself moving from your role as an advocate to a new role as a judge?
Remaining completely unbiased and impartial, seeking justice for both sides. As an advocate, we're always advocating for one side or the other. We're attacking the other side's evidence or testimony they're giving. We're presenting our client or our case in the light most favorable to them. As a judge, I see the challenge as ferreting out from each side what is true, what is accurate and what is most important in the result. And as a family law judge, that would be what is most important for the children. That's what I see as most challenging. Having worked both sides of custody cases, divorce cases, I've made one argument one day and turned around and made the exact opposite one the next day because I'm representing the defendant, not the plaintiff. So I think the challenge will be moving from that is to see through the arguments and the, I hate to say it, but I'm an attorney, so is Attorney Hershey, the smoke screen that we attorneys try to put up for a judge and show why our side is right and the other side doesn't have a clue what's going on here. I think that's the biggest challenge, to ferret out what is truly the most important facts and apply them impartially. Thank you.
Thank you. Attorney Hershey, what challenges do you foresee for yourself moving from your role as an advocate to a new role as a judge?
Well, some of my background, I think I've served in roles where I was, maybe while I was advocating for a client, at the same time I was also trying to and advocating for what's best, in this case, for the children. For example, I've served as a guardian ad litem for children. In that role, it's your job to do what's best for the kids, to make recommendations to the judge as far as what's in the best interest of the children. And to a certain extent, I think you do that as a prosecutor. As a prosecutor, what do? You decide what is an appropriate resolution for a case. So, but for me personally, as far as challenges go, I think it potentially would be a challenge as a judge when you're dealing with families with addiction issues. When you have parents who truly love their children, but they can't parent their children right now. Those types of cases are heart-wrenching, and ultimately what the law tells us is, what do we have to do? We have to do what's in the best interest of the children. Sometimes those decisions are, you know what, Mom, you know what, Dad, you can't parent your child right now, so you're not going to be around your child. I think that would be very challenging, because at some point, what is our goal? Our goal is for Mom and Dad to overcome their addiction issues and be able to parent their children. So sometimes I think it would be a challenge deciding when's the right time for that. When are they ready to parent their children? Thank you.
Thank you. How are we doing? Doing okay?
Fine.
We only got about 35 more questions. There is water on the table. Attorney Hershey, how will you ensure that citizens of all backgrounds have adequate access to legal help and the legal system?
Well, I think currently there are systems in place, there are certain rights that people have to ensure that they have access to the courts. Any citizen who comes before the court must be assured that they're going to have an impartial judge. I think it's a cornerstone of our legal system. You're going to have your day in court, and you're going to get a fair shot, regardless of who you know, where you work, where you come from. You're going to get your day in court. Additionally, as it relates to family court, in many cases you'll have parents come before the court not represented by counsel. And I think in the last few years there's been some really good advances made, such as forms are made available to give parents who don't have an attorney, give them access to the courts, to make it not such a daunting proposition to go into court and maybe sue for custody. I think really what I would do as judge is just make sure those things continue to remain in place, and make sure those who do not have counsel have access to it, and that they know what their options are. Thank you.
Thank you. Attorney Deal, how will you ensure that citizens of all backgrounds have adequate access to legal help and the legal system?
Well, as judge, I think your hands are kind of tied. You can't personally get involved with any particular individual or individuals coming in, whether they're indigent or not. However, I believe as a judge, you can ensure that any individual that comes into court has had an opportunity, a fair opportunity, and every opportunity to obtain counsel. If someone would appear before me unrepresented, I would make sure that they were aware of all the programs that are out there and available, through legal aid, Your Safe Haven. They all have counsel on staff to help people. I would ensure that if an indigent person or any unrepresented person came in, that they were aware of those opportunities to seek counsel. Not everyone wants that, and that would be fine, but I think as judge, it would be to ensure that they were aware of all the opportunities and what was available to them to obtain counsel, to assist them in whatever type of case that they were presenting or appearing in court in front of.
Thank you. Attorney Deal, how have you exhibited servant leadership in our community, and how do you expect to do so if elected?
Well, I believe how I have shown it in the past, working with domestic relations, serving through the court system as court-appointed master in road cases, boundary line cases, property disputes, having served as guardian ad litem for senior citizens that may need assistance, or in a few occasions for the children. So I believe I have shown that as an assistant district attorney and district attorney. I have worked with people, started back in 2000, getting a drug task force up and running for the district attorney's office, being instrumental in getting that started. Working in 1992 with then DA, now Judge Ling, and getting Your Safe Haven started. Very instrumental there and working with the community. Unfortunately, as judge, to being a leader in the community, I would have to do that from the bench, show impartiality and unbiased. I'm sure most of you are aware, if not, as a judicial official or appointee or employee, what you can do in the community is very limited. You can have no political overtones whatsoever. So I would do the social activities would have to be pretty much from the bench because we're very limited in what we can do. Thank you.
Thank you. Attorney Hershey, how have you exhibited servant leadership in our community, and how do you expect to do so if elected?
Well, I think servant leadership is very important, and I do want to clarify one thing. When we talk about servant leadership, or when I'm talking about servant leadership, I'm not talking about what I do at my job. That's my job. When I was an assistant DA, when I worked as a special deputy attorney general, that's my job. But when we talk about servant leadership, I think what we're really talking about is what do you do in your free time? What do you do with that little bit of free time that you have? And for me, I really believe in investing in the community, and I think my background and my history has shown that. As I've already mentioned, I serve on various boards. I'm especially proud of my service on the Bedford County Pink Ribbon Fund, helping those who are afflicted with breast cancer. And frankly, it's very rewarding to me as well. I'm active in the Bedford Sunrise Rotary Club, and we do a lot locally in this community. And actually, we always laugh because I take my kids with me to Rotary. And I'm hoping just by sitting in that room and doing the various service projects that will sink in for them too. I'm also an associate member of the Bedford Lions Club. I'm on the board of directors of PSI, the Bedford Library, and various other organizations. But I really do believe that servant leadership means investing in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Attorney Hershey, considering the perceived sluggishness of the judicial process, what would you do to streamline the pursuit of justice?
Thank you. Well, I'm glad you asked that question because I actually do have a lot to say about that. I always tell my clients when they come in, because clients, they watch TV and they're expecting to have their case heard, decided, and adjudicated within like an hour. And I say sometimes the wheels of justice, and not sometimes, pretty much all the time, the wheels of justice turn agonizingly slow. But with that being said, I think there are some things that can occur to help move things along. For example, if you're scheduled for a 9 o'clock hearing, I think it makes sense to get started shortly after 9. In talking to voters throughout my campaign, that's one of the complaints that the average citizen has about the court system is that it just takes forever. Nothing ever runs according to schedule. And I think by making sure all the parties and the attorneys, especially the attorneys, come to court on time and prepared and ready to go. And as judge, you do actually have a little bit of control over that. So I really think that it would be important for the incoming judge, and I would pledge, if elected, we're going to run an efficient, timely, and organized court schedule. Thank you.
Thank you. Attorney Deal, considering the perceived sluggishness of the judicial process, what would you do to streamline the pursuit of justice?
Well, I don't know that it's a perceived sluggishness. The judicial system grinds slow. It is sluggish. Some of that is, again, as Attorney Hershey mentioned, attorneys not being on time or showing up prepared. I think I would take a very stern approach to that. You would be here for the start at 9. We will start at 9. Be prepared. I don't want to have attorneys show up and say, well, Your Honor, we need about an hour to negotiate this, or a half hour. The negotiations should have been done before you stand in front of the court. At that time, you should be ready to proceed, present your evidence, your witness, or any agreement that you may have. I would encourage attorneys to any extent possible to stipulate to certain facts. Why are we going to litigate, or why are you going to both sides present me evidence that agrees? If there are issues you agree on, please tell the court to begin with. That can speed things along. Let's stay on point. I would try to keep attorneys to what's relevant. Let's not get out into the gray area or bring up something that's already been litigated. I've probably been at fault at it once or twice, but I've seen attorneys do this. You're in for the third time for a custody hearing. They want to go back and discuss what was done the first hearing. No, let's move forward. So I believe I would try to keep it as efficient and timely and have the attorneys be prepared. Thank you.
Thank you. Attorney Deal, if you became aware of unethical conduct on the part of a trial advocate in a case in which you were presiding, how would you handle it? Do you believe judges should be required to report attorney misconduct?
I'll answer the last question, kind of part of that first. Yes, I think judges should be required. I think if you see an attorney doing something unethical, I think anyone in the legal system, anyone that has a law degree, should report that. That does us all injustice. If a state trooper, a local police officer does something bad and people see that, all of a sudden they dislike the entire law enforcement. If they see an attorney stand in front of a court and lie or do something else that's unethical, foul something they know that's not been properly executed, I think that gives the whole judicial system, the whole legal system, a very bad opinion to people. People then just totally lose faith in the system. And without having ethical attorneys presenting ethical opinions, evidence, and cases, you only slow down what's already a sluggish system. People just completely lose faith. You're going to have people doing self-help remedies, I'm afraid, if it got to that point. So yes, I think, in my opinion, yes, we should have to, and yes, I would report unethical behavior on behalf of a litigator to the disciplinary board.
Thank you. Attorney Hershey, if you became aware of unethical conduct on the part of a trial advocate in a case in which you were presiding, how would you handle it? Do you believe judges should be required to report attorney misconduct?
Well, I think the integrity of our judicial or legal system is tantamount. It's a cornerstone of our entire system of law. It is incredibly important. That is why attorneys are subject, as judges as well, the rules of professional conduct. Certain things that you cannot, should not do. As a judge, I believe a judge is absolutely obligated to report any misconduct on the part of an attorney to the disciplinary board, without question. And really, I don't have anything else more to say about that, because it's such a straightforward answer. Without question, yes, a judge should hold an attorney accountable and make a report to the disciplinary board.
Thank you. Attorney Hershey, what do you perceive as the greatest obstacles to justice?
Well, I think I've often said that justice is sometimes very difficult, not only to ascertain, but to pinpoint. What's justice to one person is not justice to another. In the realm of criminal law, I would submit that it's a little bit easier to pinpoint what justice means. But I've been with families of homicide victims and had defendants sentenced to life in prison. But at the end of the day, when you sit down with the victim's family, do they really feel that that's justice? I don't know, because their loved one's not coming back. In the realm of family law cases, what we see a lot is a lot of addiction issues. So I think overcoming and dealing with addiction issues, and in the realm of justice for families and justice for, what is justice for children? I would suggest is probably having two caring, healthy, plugged-in parents. So I think probably the addiction issues that are out there is the biggest challenge. Thank you.
Thank you. Attorney Deal, what do you perceive as the greatest obstacles to justice?
I guess I would refer back to the prior question. Unethical, unprepared attorneys. For a judge to make a decision that is just and fair for everyone, he or she has to be presented with all the relevant, pertinent facts, accurately and correctly. Not misconstrue them to make your client look better or to make the other side look worse. I think a well-prepared, well-presented case on behalf of both parties would go a long way to enabling a judge to make a fair and just decision. A judge's hands are somewhat tied in how he or she disperses justice. What I mean by that is they got to make a decision on what's presented to them in that case. So if they aren't presented with the correct or the entirety of the information, how are they to make a just decision? So I would see the biggest hurdle to justice is how and what evidence is presented to the judge. Thank you.
Thank you. Attorney Deal, what criteria would you use for deciding whether to impose or affirm sentences outside of standard ranges?
Well, I would apply exactly what the rules require. If you're going to go outside a standard sentencing range, and what that is the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania puts out, the Sentencing Commission puts out standard range sentences. You can go above or below that. However, they set forth what criteria a judge must look into. He must explain and give reasons as to why you go above or beyond. Some things may be, one that's built in is already a defendant's prior criminal record. However, you would look at that prior criminal record. Is it 20 years old, or has this individual been committing crimes every year for the last 20 years? That would be one thing. The severity of the case in front of you. Victim impact statements. Victims often, in criminal cases, give statements. I've watched many a judge sit on a bench, have a sentence wrote out, and then start to cross it out because of what they've heard from a victim. So what I would apply is the requirements that the Supreme Court has set down, and I would look at each case on an individual basis. But primarily the things would be victim impact, as well as how did the defendant get to where he's at. What was his prior record and when was it done? Thank you.
Thank you. Attorney Hershey, what criteria would you use for deciding whether to impose or affirm sentences outside of standard ranges?
Well, I agree with Attorney Deal in the sense that the law already states what a judge is to consider when sentencing a defendant. The rules of criminal procedure set forth what considerations should be given if you're going to sentence either above or below the standard range sentence. And quite frankly, it's up to the judge to simply apply those. I think over the years, victim impact statements have been given as each year passes. There's more exposure to that. I think now pending in the legislature is a Crime Victims' Bill of Rights, because part of our judicial system is we focus on what are the defendant's rights. We want to make sure their rights are protected, certainly. But historically, sometimes the victims of the crime themselves really just didn't feel like they had a voice, and I think you're going to see some real changes moving forward. So I would actually mirror what Attorney Deal said in the sense of a victim's impact statement is very important, and I think you're going to see moving forward that victims will have a little bit more say in, or a little bit more of an opportunity to have an impact on the sentence ultimately that the judge gives. Thank you.
Thank you. Attorney Hershey, do you believe there is such a thing as a victimless crime? And if so, what offenses would you place in this category?
I do not believe there is such a thing as a victimless crime. And just to explain what that means is if there's an individual who's maybe addicted to drugs and they get stopped by the police and they get arrested, or maybe they're driving under the influence and they don't crash into anyone or cause property damage or hurt anyone. In some cases, those are termed victimless crimes. Well, they're not victimless crimes, because that person who's addicted to drugs, they have families, they have children, and I think this is very important in the realm of family law. Even if an individual might not be in front of the criminal court system, there's a huge impact on other people. As I said, the families, society. If an individual's addicted and they overdose, how does that affect all of us? Well, I'm here to tell you it does. They're taken to the hospital, they're treated, and they hopefully utilize services to hopefully get on the right track and get back on the right path. But this whole idea where we hear about victimless crimes, I don't subscribe to that, because I think society and the community ends up, or the family ends up paying the price. Thank you.
Thank you. Attorney Deal, do you believe there is such a thing as a victimless crime? If so, what offenses would you place in this category?
Well, let me state I agree completely with what Attorney Hershey said. There is no such thing as a victimless crime. I have seen numerous, hundreds of police complaints. I have yet to see one under where it lists victim number 1. I have never seen that blank, ever. A lot of times that will say society. And that's really if there is no particular individual that you can point to that had an injury, a physical injury, or property damage, then society is a victim. DUI is a prime example, as Attorney Hershey said. There's one that people want to consider as a victimless crime. Someone gets pulled over for no inspection sticker for DUI. Okay, well, we have just now taken one of our troopers or police officers out of his duty of patrolling and safeguarding the citizens. That's costing the county, the state, everyone money. If it is someone that is on opioid addiction or marijuana, that harms the family. That money had to come from somewhere to buy those narcotics or those illegal substances. There's a victim, always. If there's an overdose, now many states require that EMTs and everybody carry Narcan. Who do you think pays for that? We do. There is a victim in every crime. Quite often it may be society, but there is a victim. Thank you.
Thank you. Attorney Deal, please describe one instance in which you faced an ethical dilemma and how you resolved it.
I guess that'll take me a minute, and I hope not a minute and a half, to think of one. Quite often as an attorney, you face them all the time. I would say the biggest one I have faced is as a defense attorney. When I was representing individuals, they'll tell you, well, here's what happened on that night, here's what I did, but I want you to put me on the witness stand, and here's what I'm going to say. I say, oh no, wait, now we got a problem. Ethically, I have to tell the judge my client's about to commit fraud, Your Honor. They told me they did A, they're going to take this witness stand and say B. Luckily, I have always convinced my clients that want to say B when they've already told me A is what happened. I've convinced them not to take the witness stand and not had to address that with the judge. But that's how I would resolve it, and that's how we're required as attorneys. If you know one of your clients is going to commit fraud, you must notify the court that they're going to commit perjury. Thank you.
Thank you. Attorney Hershey, please describe one instance in which you faced an ethical dilemma and how you resolved it.
What comes to mind is a case I had fairly recently. Well, when I say recently, I guess I mean within the last year or so. But I was appointed by the court to serve as a guardian ad litem for an incapacitated individual. So my client was an elderly individual, and like many folks in that scenario, they were faced with going to a nursing home or being able to stay in their own home. Well, of course, the client wants to stay in their own home. Who wouldn't? Of course they do. However, sometimes an individual's health, both mental and physical, has declined. Maybe the person's suffering from dementia or Alzheimer's, and really it's not safe for them to live in their own home. They need the services of a skilled nursing center. When you serve as guardian ad litem for an incapacitated individual, your job essentially is to be that person's voice in court, to advocate for them, but at the same time, more often than not, the judge will ask the guardian ad litem, okay, what do you think? Does this person need a guardian appointed for them? You know, what do you think? The ethical dilemma is what I think versus what my client wants is two different things. So in that particular case, what I indicated to the court is that this is what my client wants. However, my contact with my client leads me to this conclusion, but this is what my client wants. And then I let the judge decide.
Thank you. Attorney Hershey, what has been your greatest accomplishment in your legal career and in your personal life?
Now that is a good question. I think my biggest accomplishment professionally, I think it's when I made the decision to open my own private law practice. Because when you open your own practice, you're going, for at least for me, I was going from a job that I always say most days I enjoyed it. Had a lot of experience in it. I was good at it. But I just felt it was time to go, to take a different fork in the road. But as I said, when you do that, you don't know if the phone's going to ring. You don't know. It's just the great unknown, I guess we'll say. And I want to thank my husband, Brad, because all along he was, oh, you can do this, you got this. But sometimes we doubt ourselves. But I did, I took this step, and it's been very, very, very rewarding, very successful. So I think it was opening my own private law practice. On a personal level, probably, well, that's a little more difficult. I just think my biggest accomplishment is being a parent and being a wife, and I'm also certainly proud to say I'm a breast cancer survivor. So even though I'm supposed to pick one, I guess I'll pick those three. So thank you.
Thank you. Attorney Deal, what has been your greatest accomplishment in your legal career and in your personal life?
In my career, I'll start leading into the actual answer for the legal career. I think in my career was when I left the United States Patent and Trademark Office in Washington, D.C., making $62,000 a year, returning to Bedford in 1992 to make 19, with a family of 3. So I think that was the biggest one. I've never regretted it one time. I've enjoyed my legal career here immensely. I enjoy it every day. Not to say there aren't good and bad days, but I do. If I want to pick one particular incident, it would be a case that I tried as a district attorney. We got a conviction on a gentleman that had molested a young child. And to see the relief, the closure, and the joy in that child's face was probably the greatest accomplishment I've had in my legal career. In my personal life, I would have to say, and I apologize for the voice breaking up, but it's marrying my wife and raising 4 children without any opioid addiction, any involvement with the court system, and having them all now with careers, degrees, and families of their own. Thank you.
Thank you. Attorney Deal, please describe a situation in which you took a controversial position that angered or offended people. Explain how you handled it and what you learned from that experience.
I would say probably the most controversial positions, and a lot of what a district attorney does is somewhat what a judge does when he or she is reviewing a case, is do you go forward with prosecution, do you plea bargain it, or do you null pros it? And it would be settling certain cases. I can't particularly name one, but it would be when you would settle it and the victims or the family or just the general public wants to know, why did you do that? And how I would handle it is, as I would explain it, look, I'm here as an elected official, a district attorney, and my job, much like the courts as a judge, is to seek justice. That's not to seek a conviction or anything else, life sentences, jail time, probation. It's to seek justice for both the victims and the defendant. So I would say, and then explaining what I meant by justice, why I felt this was a fair outcome. A lot of times what you have to do and how I've handled it is explain to the victims that sometimes juries, while they get it right, don't always see it the way the family does. Obviously, you're in an adversarial situation. The family and the victim see it one way, the defendant sees another, the jury usually sees it the right way. And explaining to them, I don't want 12 people to tell you you were wrong. I've got you something, I've got you closure.
Thank you. Attorney Hershey, please describe a situation in which you took a controversial position that angered or offended people, and explain how you handled it and what you learned from that experience.
Well, I think the case that comes to mind for me is a particular case that it's one of those that stays with you, to a certain extent keeps you up at night. And that was a case years and years ago up in Blair County when I was a prosecutor up there. A teenage girl made an allegation against her stepfather that he had been touching her inappropriately. So charges were brought, we were preparing for trial, and it really just became apparent to me as an experienced prosecutor that, you know, did we have enough evidence to prove this beyond a reasonable doubt? And, you know, having to sit down with the girl and tell her, listen, I believe you, and I did believe her. But here's the facts we have to present to the jury. Here's what the defense is going to say. I don't know that this jury is going to convict. I have real doubts whether or not this jury is going to convict. And of course, the girl was upset. At that point, she didn't have the support of her mother. It was just heartbreaking. And in the end, we decided to offer a plea agreement to the defendant of a lesser charge. It was just very difficult to express to her that, yes, I believe you, but I don't think we have enough evidence to move forward and get a conviction.
Thank you. Attorney Hershey, if you observed an individual in your courtroom being poorly represented by an unprepared or ineffective advocate, how would you handle the situation?
Well, I've actually seen that. So, I guess this is finally the question I've always wanted to answer. If I had the power to do something, what would I do? As a judge, I think you have an obligation to ensure that if a person has an attorney, that they're being appropriately represented. So number one, I think as a judge, you have an obligation to do something. So the question becomes, what is it that you do? If I were to observe that, I would probably halt the proceedings, call the attorneys back into chambers, and see what the problem was. If I felt that the individual or the client couldn't be appropriately represented, then I most likely would hold the proceedings or continue the case and look into it a little bit further as far as, are there ethical considerations here? Or did the attorney violate rules of professional conduct and proceed accordingly? The problem is if you go ahead and steamroll ahead, my experience in those cases is what ends up happening, especially in criminal cases. You want to get the case done, you want to bring closure for all the parties and not drag it out longer. But when you push it forward, it ends up coming back around later on appeal. So I'm of the opinion that these matters need to be dealt with at that time, not sometime in the future.
Thank you. Attorney Deal, if you observed an individual in your courtroom being poorly represented by an unprepared or ineffective advocate, how would you handle the situation?
Well, differently than I would really like to. I'd like to tell the client that you may want to seek other counsel. But as a judge, you can't do that. As Attorney Hershey said, we're limited in what we can do, but I wholeheartedly agree with what she said. You would at least take a recess. You would halt the proceedings for a minute, meet with counsel, recently, I wasn't present in court, but I've heard there was an attorney that really had some medical problems going on and was just completely acting uncharacteristically for what all attorneys and judges knew this attorney. He just wasn't doing the job he normally did. I would try to see if there was something like that going on, give the counsel continuance if they needed it, or just try to see if there was an underlying problem. If, unfortunately, it's just, as an attorney, I think we all hate to point out any faults of colleagues. We all have our own faults. But if it's just a poor attorney in a judge's opinion, I don't think there is anything you can do. You just proceed on. But if there is something you can do, you do need to stop it, assist the client immediately. Because as Attorney Hershey said, all you're going to do is see it again. It'll get appealed. In criminal matter, there'll be a PCRA, there'll be new attorneys about ineffective counsel, and you get to hear the whole thing a second time. So address it immediately. Thank you.
Thank you. Attorney Deal, who are your judicial role models and why?
Well, if I wanted to go broad and nationally, it would have been the late Justice, U.S. Supreme Court Justice Anton Scalia, and again, because he was a strict constructionist. The Constitution means what it meant when it was written and drafted in 1776. Locally, I would have to say it was Judge Hauser. He ran a very efficient courtroom. His criminal case log did not get backlogged. He kept attorneys on point, kept them direct, kept things moving. He ran a very efficient, timely courtroom. He always showed up 10 minutes before a case was to start in judges' chambers to see which attorneys showed up first and which one was late. So I would say locally it would be Judge Hauser because of the way he ran his courtroom. On a more national level would have been the late Justice Scalia, and basically for his beliefs and the strict constructionist of the Constitution.
Thank you. Attorney Hershey, who are your judicial role models and why?
Well, from the Supreme Court standpoint, I've always identified with former Chief Justice William Rehnquist. Again, he was a strict constructionalist. He believed that a judge's position is to interpret the law, not make it, not legislate from the bench. And I think I may have even mentioned this earlier, and it was Chief Justice Rehnquist who said that there's no place in a courtroom for social change, social policies. That's not where social policies are enacted. I believe he had a great deal of respect from both conservatives and liberals, and I think the reason for that was he was able to build a consensus, and I think there's a lot to be said for that. He was renowned for being civil, thoughtful, a careful deliberator, whereas, and I agree with you, Scalia, I think Scalia's views are very similar to a lot of our views here in Bedford County. One thing I always thought about Scalia was in court, he was kind of a little bit of a bully. And I always identified a little closer with Chief Justice Rehnquist simply because he made his point, he made it eloquently, and he made it civilly. He was a true gentleman. Thank you.
Thank you. Earlier, I wasn't telling the truth about 35 more questions. In fact, this is the last question. Attorney Hershey, why should voters support you rather than your opponent?
Well, I believe that I would be a good judge here in Bedford County for a couple reasons. Number one, I was born and raised here. I have a broad, diverse legal experience, which I think certainly any judge should have. I think I have a history, proven history and reputation for investing in this community, for community service. I care about this community. I care about the families in this community. We're raising our children in this community, and I want it to be a safe place for our families to be raised. Additionally, and I think throughout my 20 years of law experience, I've developed a reputation for strong legal understanding, for civility, thoughtfulness, careful deliberation, and even temperament, all of which would contribute, I believe, to the dignity and public perception and deserving of the bench. I think as a judge, I would balance justice with compassion, and I think that's certainly important in the realm of family law. Thank you.
Thank you. Attorney Deal, why should voters support you rather than your opponent?
Well, this is going to sound like a broken record. I have nothing negative to say about my opponent, but I believe I have a few more years experience, not only in age on her, but in legal experience. I have 27 years. I've been a district attorney, assistant district attorney, public defender. I've worked numerous cases, having been appointed by numerous judges. I think my experience is why I would make a good judge for Bedford County. I believe I have a reputation of being fair, just, and applying the law to every case that I have been handed or that I have worked on. So I believe that I make the better candidate simply because I have more experience and a broad-based experience. And again, I believe I have shown compassion and impartiality in the things and the cases that I have worked on and decisions I have made in the past. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you please join me in thanking our candidates? Thank you so much to our event partners, the Bedford County Bar Association and the Bedford County Farm Bureau. A big thank you to the Bedford County Elks Club. I would like to thank Kelly Goodman-Schaefer and her staff and the committee for the hours of work that they spend on putting these events together. And finally, Bob